Hey, folks, it is September the 14th, and we're going to continue with our lecture on the Progressive Era. We are going to have our test coming up pretty soon. I have some information I have to find out on when progress report grades are supposed to be coming in, because I would prefer our test to be in before then. So at the earliest, it's going to be on Friday, but if we can't do it on Friday, we're going to do it on Monday. But I'll let you know as soon as I find out that answer, because sometimes progress reports come out a couple of days after grades are due, but more often than not, they're due the Friday before. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to punish you over it, though. I want to make sure you have adequate time to get ready. So don't worry. I usually err on the side of leniency, even though I shouldn't. All right. So what do we see up here? What's going on here? Who is that dude? Who on earth? He's standing on something, and he's wearing a hat, and he's got the fancy pants. So he must be Uncle Sam. Yeah, he represents the United States of America. And what is he looking at and not looking too happy about? Europe. Yeah, Europe's smoking. It's on fire. It ain't what it used to be, which is a lie. Europeans have killed each other since there have been Europeans. I mean, that's one thing. The norm for Europe is they're usually at war somewhere or another. Judgment. All right. So, yeah, that's the thing. If you remember back from your early American history courses, the United States had a big policy on trying to mind its own affairs. But during the Progressive Era, we start looking out more overseas. So remember, this is an overview of what we are going to talk about in this unit. So during this time, the United States pulled itself out of isolationist policy that had guided it since the presidency of George Washington. This involvement into world events began with the Spanish-American War in 1898, which we will talk about. Yep. And the First World War, 1914-1918. So, two major world events, especially for the United States. The United States will expand its involvement into places such as Guam, Hawaii, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and much, much more. The U.S. also became intensely involved with Latin American affairs and constructed the Panama Canal, linking the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. So, so the United States is going to start looking a bit further than just from sea to shining sea. Of course, a lot of this has to do with, as I mentioned before, you have this missionary aspect. People who think that there's just so many great things about the American lifestyle, and it'd be really great to pull up people that were viewed as savages into the first world, right? Like teach them the wonders of a constitutional government, commerce, Christianity, stuff like that. But also expansion was good for business. So you gotta remember, more and more things that had to do with American domestic policy was being shaped by the expansion of factories. Well, a lot of these industries wanted access to foreign markets. So that kind of gives our politicians an influence to looking abroad. Oh no, what happened here? It's not the Titanic, by the way. It's not the Titanic. Don't say that. So, anybody? It's a sunken boat. I mean, obviously, but more than that, it's one of our military vessels, and this is going to be a big boo boo. All right. So, what led the U.S. out of isolationism? So, like I kind of mentioned. So, with reforms in the Progressive Era, many Americans began to desire reforming other nations as well. So, you call that? You say, well, it has a good side to it. It's like we have to help our fellow man, but you could also say, talk about some busybodies, right? I mean, you have nothing better to do than to try to help other people live their own lives. This has come under some criticism as colonialism or imperialism, modern imperialism, where it's not about holding land, it's about shaping people into something else. Some saw it as an American duty to bring third world nations into modernity through the same spirit and practices as missionaries. President McKinley became the 25th president in 1897, writing on the promises of reform and progressive policies. Progressivism, as I mentioned time and time again, it's one of those things that's going to be very popular, especially with middle class Americans in the cities. It's going to have somewhat of an involvement in the countryside, but not that much. But it's going to be a popular thing pretty much. During his presidency, McKinley's that is, Cuba, a Spanish colony at this time, was fighting a war for its independence. So this is one of those things is like in the newspapers and stuff like that, a lot of Americans supported the Cuban Revolution away from Spain because they saw it as something that was similar to the American Revolution. So it had a lot of popular support in the U.S., and a lot of Americans wanted to aid Cuba. American journalists exaggerated Spanish atrocities, inciting popular hatred for the Spanish. So once again, muckrakers were going in, and there was a lot of accurate journalism coming out, but there was also some sensationalism as well. So remember, these guys are trying to sell newspapers. So there are stories of like rampant raping and murders and stuff like that. And I'm sure there was quite a bit of it. But remember, the newspapers did this on all topics at the time. And some might say the news still does that today. But we'll see. We'll see. Oh, well. Remember, it's like clickbait of their time. But in any case, Spain kind of was getting tired of it, of having its old imperial holdings anyways, because it was very expensive. And Spain was no longer the super rich country it used to be before the Napoleonic era. All of that Aztec gold had been spent. And when it was spent, it kind of caused such bad inflation, it ruined their country. Napoleon broke Spain's back as well when he took over it following the French Revolution. It never really recovered all that well. So, yeah, they did. I mean, really, they didn't have that many troops in Cuba, but they did some things that were just making Americans very upset because they were putting a lot of the families into something that the British discovered how to do: concentration camps. No, not like to execute them, but they were essentially prison camps for the family members of people who were fighting the Spanish. The British made this tactic very popular in the Boer Wars in Africa, where they had such a hard time fighting the Dutch revolutionaries there that they wound up just imprisoning their families until they gave up. So if we can't stop you, we'll just take your family. So, and then you're going to see that used in World War One, and Hitler's going to use it a lot if you don't know that. All right. I'm sorry. My wife said that my little dog got stepped on by the big dog, the giant mastiff, and broke his foot. So, yeah, so he has a broken dog foot.
But dogs kind of look cute with little casts, but it's really sad.
Yeah. Not an emergency, but a little complicated. Could be like, okay, I can see.
That's going to be expensive, I'm sorry.
Better not be too expensive. It's just. Don't say that. All right, so we're at script 235 because I can't do that right now. All right, so. And see, that's the thing about old school imperialism. When you're trying to hold land, it's usually not as profitable as what you reap from that land, unless you're just super brutal, like how the Dutch were in the Congo. Like some forms of imperialism at this time, they were literally just taking everything they could and enslaving and using up the population like machinery. And this is when slavery was supposed to be illegal through almost the entire world at the time, except for certain third world places. Oh yeah, the African Congo. Like if you ever want to read about, there's a book called "The Heart of Darkness." Um, this journalist wrote about what he saw there, and they had horrible, horrible prison camps. Um, and when the Africans didn't work hard enough, or if they thought they would fight back, they'd like cut off their hands and stuff. Um, Terrible stuff. Terrible, terrible. Uh, but this is also during a time period when racism was very justified in pseudosciences. So people had a lot of mental check marks kind of knocked off to where they didn't feel quite as bad for doing these things, I guess. So yeah, terrible stuff. Let me know when you're ready. I really like my Mastiff, but gosh, sometimes she's just so big.
What kind of dog is she?
She's a Mastiff. So when she stands up, her head's here. And when she stands up on her hind legs, she's like,
Nah, that is freaky.
yeah, they were actually bred. The Spanish Mastiffs were bred to eat people.
Ew.
In the ours is an English Mastiff, and some of them were actually used in the English Civil Wars. Like tackle you. Whoop. But the thing is they're a really docile breed though, so they really got to be trained to be mean. So, I don't know. Mastiffs are very big. Look, show you real quick. Yeah, there was one during the English Civil War. I forgot the name of the general, but he was he had an English Mastiff called Boy, and he would send Boy out into battle and go off to fight the other, and he'd start fighting the other side, and gosh, what was that? Yeah, they were part of the Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers' enemies actually thought it was like otherworldly. See, that's a Mastiff. See, there's his owner. Muffin's more like that size. She's not like the boys can get super big, but the girls, like, see, that one's 250 pounds. That's a monster, right? So like, yeah, it's about Muffin size. Her head's a little smaller than that, but her head's definitely bigger than my head, right? And she's that color too. Oh yeah, yesterday she jumped and she went to my knee, and my knee almost hyperextended. I was like, Jesus, what are you doing? So, and I've had that one hyperextend a few times before, so I was like pretty mad at her. But yeah, they're very big. They're one of the largest dog breeds. She's not that blonde. Yeah, it's a good size one. See, if this one stands up, that's a boy. He'd be about his height. They're pretty big. The thing is, though, is they're big wusses. Like they're one of the least aggressive breeds. Super babies. So they're weirdly enough, they're good with kids and like kittens and stuff. So. You wouldn't think that. We do. I didn't want to, but they got brought home. I'd give them away, but my kids are attached. All right, so let's move on to the next one.
If the kids are attached, there's no way.
Oh, I don't mind cats. I just don't like indoor cats.
No, if the kids are attached, then there's no way of getting rid of it.
Hey.
I want a cat.
Hey, what's this? Do you recognize the guy with the glasses? We've seen a picture of him before.
Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. So yeah, Theodore Roosevelt's a weird guy. So he grew up a really wealthy family in New York. And Roosevelt's a German last name, so he's kind of like an oddball as far as like the communities go in New York. Not a lot of Germans stuck around New York, from my understanding. I could be wrong, but he grew up. He's kind of like a small, sickly kid, but he started taking boxing and working out, and then he said that turned him around, and so then he started. He had some kind of governor. I don't know if he was governor of New York, if he was mayor of New York, and he also did like Sunday school and stuff like that. So he was a teacher. And then eventually he's going to become, he's going to be in charge of the Navy, the Department of the Navy. And once this war comes up, he's like, oh my gosh, I got to go fight. And so he resigns and he asks for permission and gets permission to make a special unit in the military called the Rough Riders. And so he goes to Texas and Oklahoma, and he recruits cowboys and Indians to make this special unit, and then they go off and they fight in Cuba. So, as Americans read about the war for Cuban independence, they were further enraged by the Delone letter in which Spanish ambassador mocked the U.S. president. And so this was seen as like a grave deal. Now, if that kind of thing happens these days, I think people are kind of cynical and feel like, oh, ha, ha, whatever, who cares? But back then, that was a big deal. To be a diplomat and to do that kind of thing, it was just like literally everybody felt like they was making fun of them. In 1898, the USS Maine exploded and sank in the Havana harbor. So it was one of our military vessels. Yeah, that was the Maine. I forgot at the time. But yeah, so the thing is, it was down there, but we hadn't declared war. And so I think it was bringing supplies to the rebels. I don't quite remember. But these things were steam power. And steam power boats were notorious for having boiler room explosions and the whole thing sinking. Like the old river boats going up and down the Mississippi River, like in Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, those things were notorious for blowing up. It was like they had like the life expectancy of 5 years, right? Things just went wrong and they exploded. Well, this one had the same thing happen, but Americans weren't sure of what happened. And so we thought it may have been Spain attacking us. So in 1998, Congress declared war on Spain. And, when you think you're attacked, it's pretty serious.
1998?
1898. 1898. Yeah, don't worry. No. We wouldn't declare war on Spain. The U.S. first. Yeah, wrong century.
Wrong century. Wait, what?
All right, so we have a naval vessel there. It explodes. We couldn't figure out why at first what happened, but we blamed Spain, especially after the Delone letter, and especially after U.S. A lot of people were just like very upset about all this. Yes. Well, before all this too, Spain had warned us that if we interfered with Cuba, that would be an act of war. So we thought they must have started it. The U.S. first attacked the Spanish Navy in the Pacific, securing the Philippines. So McKinley knew that we were most likely going to go to war with them, but he didn't want to start it, all right? So he already had the U.S. Navy off the California coast go over towards the Philippines. And as soon as this happened, he had them attack the Spanish there because the Philippines had been taken by Spain a long time ago. In fact, it's named after King Philip of Spain, right? And so, I don't know which one. I don't remember. So, and they've been subjugated by the Spanish. The Spanish, as colonial people there, they tried to get rid of Tagalog native speech there. They tried to actually breed out Filipinos, teach them to only speak Spanish and all this other stuff a long time ago. And so the fleet's there. There's some fighting. The Filipinos are very happy about this at first. Then the U.S. invaded Cuba as Colonel Theodore Roosevelt, McKinley's ex-Secretary of the Navy, led his Rough Riders to victory at San Juan Hill.
Wait, so they attacked Cuba? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they fought in Cuba. They were fighting the Spanish.
But they didn't fight Cuba?
No, not the Cubans.
Cubans?
Yeah, the Cubans were fighting with the U.S.
Oh,
against
yay.
Spain. So,
I know nothing about Cuban history, and I have Cuban.
So this is how Cuba is going to at first become America's close friend, but America's going to have a lot of influence over that, and so that's going to lead to some people being unhappy, and it's going to lead to some radicals saying, "I have an answer" later on, and we'll get to that later. So yeah, it's a war, but the Spanish didn't have that many troops there. Their soldiers didn't really want to even fight
anyways, so a lot of them gave up. We actually lost most of our soldiers in this war to disease and accidents. So, but some people did die, so which is tragic in all things. But you know, so yeah, it was. But like Americans were really happy about this. We're actually get a lot of territory that's going to fall under our protection after this. This is going to be seen as a fulfillment of, what's the name of that? The Monroe Doctrine. If you remember, that's when President Monroe said that America do whatever it could to keep European influence out of our hemisphere, right? So the whole idea was like, let every country run itself in our spectrum. So we saw this as kind of like just our destiny, like manifest destiny.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about these wars. It attracts a lot of guys to go participate, go to a place like that's totally unlike home, have some adventure, come home, talk about it. It's pretty attractive to a young guy. Have your adventure, right?
It's cool learning about human history.
I can't say I'm an expert.
I'm definitely not, and I've only heard like personal stories about it, about like what it's like there. And growing up, I thought it was like an evil, evil place, and I was like, anyone who goes there is like, that's what I always thought, like, because the way my aunt described it. Whenever she, like, it was very, very, very socialistic when she was younger there, and my mom was actually born there, and it was hard getting her to America. And so I was like, oh, they're trying to steal my family, like, how could they? But like, it's a really beautiful place, and like, the leaders have been awful, but
yeah, it has a lot of natural resources. Yeah, it's very pretty from the pictures.
But like, I've heard that it's very controlled on what if you travel there, you can see. So like one street can have like this beautiful like buildings and stuff. The next street is all shambles and no electricity and no anything. But the government doesn't want you to see that.
Yeah.
So they'll like only let you go to these certain parts that like show you these amazing parts.
China's still like that today. They're very restrictive on where you can go as a tourist. Russia used to be like that as well. I mean, yeah, I'd like to read about Cuba's Cuban Revolution sometime. Kind of reading about the Chinese one at the moment. It's dark. As dark as you can imagine. So I don't know. I read about that stuff. So I like reading about warnings. All right. So what do we got here? Judge. Yeah, I think it's a magazine. So this is like a political cartoon in a magazine, a periodical. And after all of that, the Philippines are only the stepping stone to China. So
they want to keep going.
yeah, because the Philippines was seen as kind of like a good place to set up bases for refueling navies and setting up a naval base for defenses so the United States could trade with China. Now, at this time, China was like really seen as a place that had a lot of wealth, right? And a lot of rare commodities, but they didn't have that much industry. So it was a good place to sell industrial goods and make some cash off of it. Because of that, however, the Chinese were not very well organized, and a lot of their country was actually partitioned to different countries, like Great Britain, France, Russia, and other countries, each kind of halfway owned a part of China. And so the United States wanted to get in on this as well because it promised a lot of wealth. And a lot of Americans were pushing for it because they're pushing with, remember, that missionary mindset. It's like, there's a lot of people there who were considered heathens, that were kind of awaiting the gospel. And so a lot of people thought, look, this open up our trade with them, and that'll be a great thing to do. So, however, we're going to see, though, is that's going to, like, later on, after the Maoist revolution, they're going to be very resentful. I'm not saying it's totally justified, because I would never try to justify what Mao did, but it's going to lead to propaganda, I guess. All right, so the Spanish-American War. Following the war, in 1898, Hawaii was annexed by the U.S., while Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico were ceded by Spain. So that was part of the peace agreement, is that we would get the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Some Samoan islands were also annexed in 1898, but some of those, we didn't get all of them. I think a lot of them were actually German.
Wait, what does annex mean?
Annex means that we take it in. Cede means you give it away. To annex is when you take it in.
So we took them in 1898?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was a lot later, like 19.
No, they're not states, but they're.
I saw a movie about this.
You did?
Yes.
What was it called?
I don't remember.
Oh.
But it was interesting. It was really sad.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. There are protectorates. Like Philippines isn't anymore,
They
but
didn't
Puerto
want
Rican
to
states.
be,
Annex. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of these places, especially Hawaii, like Hawaii in particular, did not want to be annexed. It wanted to be its independent kingdom, like as always. But it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing being a traditional tribal people in a modern world.
Right.
How do you survive it? Because somebody's going to come along and squash you unless you're protected. So I don't know. It's one of those things that people have a harder time justifying now, because people, because there's a very anti-nationalist mindset, I think is the way to put it. Because there are sins on all sides, so it's easy to see each other's mistakes. But yeah, they're considered part of American protectorates now. Like Puerto Ricans and Samoan and Guam, they have a kind of like a strange relationship where they get to do things like vote and stuff like that. They don't have to pay taxes, things like that. So what? Where what?
Where's Samoans from?
Samoan Islands they're like way down there, like way west of South America. It's like in the middle of the ocean. Like nothing is next to
Isn't
it.
that little island like where like Hawaii is, and then there's like some islands like all over there?
No, I think like more south. Kind of like
Wait,
in
are they
between.
like Eskimos?
No, they're Pacific Islanders. I think more like I would say they're probably closer to Hawaiians. So like they got that year-round tan. They but
My tan went away and I look like a ghost.
I gotta be careful. My tan gave me cancer. So
That's awful.
I lived through it. Yeah, you gotta be careful.
My old history teacher had skin cancer too.
Well, it's pretty common.
Oh yeah.
When I was a kid, we just didn't know. I mean, we knew, but like we didn't
But,
worry
like-
about it. We thought it was an old person thing.
I'm at risk for it, but I still tan. Nothing a little cancer won't get me.
Well, I mean, you need vitamin D though. That's the
I'm
thing.
bad at vitamins. Like I'm like 0 vitamins in my body.
Sorry to hear that.
That
All right, so back to Samoan Islands and the other islands. These islands were seen as important refueling stations for U.S. Navy, as many wish to expand our influence and protect trade influence. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, a lot of it was influenced by a very popular book at the time by a guy named Alfred Thayer Mans. And this is called, this is The Influence of Sea Power on History. So essentially saying if you want to be a great nation, like Athens or Great Britain or others, you got to have a great navy. It opens up if you make the ocean safe, there will be trade and there will be cash. And there will also be influence to keep you safe. Teddy Roosevelt became wildly popular during and after the Spanish-American War. He was already kind of a popular guy. He was quirky. He made a lot of noise in New York back when he was in government there. And now, after being a war hero, he was very popular. William McKinley was up for re-election in 1900 and chose Roosevelt as his vice president due to his popularity and to quiet a potential rival. So back then, when you made somebody vice president, that was it. That's the end of their career. A vice president didn't do anything other than host dinners. And after that, you got retirement. Well, okay, they didn't have retirement checks for presidents back then, but they will later. But yeah, that was it. That was considered your pinnacle. A lot of people in the Republican Party wanted this because they figured Roosevelt was A, really popular, and B, he wouldn't listen and do what he was told. He was more independent, and that kind of scared them. And so McKinley was like, I'll take care of this. And so he had Rosie kind of run with him. But the thing is, if you know anything about history, Roosevelt's going to become president anyways. Oh, no. Ah. And you're going to totally change the country. Teddy. That's actually the name of my dog with the broken foot, Teddy. I didn't pick it. He was a rescue dog.
He's a rescue dog?
Yeah, this lady who, actually a retired teacher who lives behind my parents' property. She collects animals from shelters and stuff. And then, after a long interview process, she'll decide whether you can take one or not. But it's very Humane Society. They want to do home visits and stuff like that. They literally want to go to your home and check on you. And then they want to go to your home later to make sure you're taking care of the dog or the cat. There's no way I'm going through that. Acting like you're adopting a person. I'm sure it comes from a good place, but I don't want strangers coming in my house and judging me. I'm like, don't care. I think the thing you need to know is these islands were taken in at the end of the war, and we want to build up a strong navy. And Teddy was popular. And yes, he is related to the other Roosevelt president. He's a cousin to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And they're going to be very different kinds of people. Even different parties. Yeah. Yeah, Roosevelt is the archetype for the expansionist, adventurous kind of president, and FDR is more reserved, but more about the ideas of not expanding abroad, but expanding federal authority at home, I guess is the way to put it. Hey, there we go. Little political thing. So the American flag has not been planted in foreign soil to acquire more territory, but for humanity's sake. So see, it's a mission. It's something it's cosmic. It's like heaven and earth. It's not about taking over land. It's about saving humanity. That was a big thing that rung to a lot of people. So it's still a theme for people today. So following the Spanish-American War, as campaign mate, Roosevelt made stump speeches across America, ensuring McKinley's reelection. Reelections are usually a shoe-in anyways, especially if you're reelected and you're the president of a successful war. That's pretty popular. But McKinley was kind of a reserved guy. He didn't go out and make public speeches, but Roosevelt did. He was really into that. That's kind of a new thing. Presidents for a long time used to not go around making speeches to people to have them elected. Roosevelt was all for it. So, however, we're going to have a problem. Poor McKinley, after being reelected with Roosevelt as his vice president,
This guy Leon Solgos, I think is how you pronounce it, is going to shoot and kill President McKinley. He's a
What?
disgruntled anarchist steelworker. Shot McKinley twice in the stomach.
Wait, who did? Roosevelt?
No, that guy Leon.
Oh, I was like, what?
No, that I forgot where he's from. He's it might have been, I don't want to say the wrong country, but yeah, he's Eastern European. Leon Zolgos, right? So here's the thing. Back then, kind of like now, anarchist was like a big thing, right? And anarchists were kind of linked where they kind of agreed with some things with socialists, but pretty much a lot of anarchists were just wanting to destroy. And so,
Not good.
oh, not good. And around this time, yeah, anarchist was a big problem. Anarchism was such a big popular thing in some countries like Eastern European countries. We actually shut down allowing those folks to come to America. But some of the ideology did come in. And so, yeah, you had lots of bombings. There was a period like in New York, they had a bombing a month, right, by anarchists. They often led riots and things like that as well. So it's a pretty rough time. Like we think of these times as like, oh, yeah, that's when Americans got together better. No, you still had socialist protests. You still had anarchists burning down buildings and assassinating people. These are things that kind of recur. They die down and they come back up. So you always have people who don't fit in and they're angry or they might have mental disorders and then stuff happens, right?
Has there ever been a president that wasn't like targeted or like wanted to be assassinated by anyone or like any threats?
I would imagine that the worry has always been there. You might find it in the early republic.
Do you think like George Washington was ever tried to be like, was ever like,
I
had
don't-
anyone ever tried to assassinate like early presidents?
I don't think so. I mean,
Was like one of the first ones.
well, Lincoln was like very surprising, right? But they already had Secret Service back then try to protect Lincoln because they knew of assassination plots about him before he died. But I'm trying to think about before that. I know there's, I think, wait. I gotta Google it so bad. Yeah, because Lincoln's not the only one to be assassinated. Neither was McKinley or Kennedy. Let's see. First. I feel bad that I don't know that off the top of my head. Let's see. Yeah, Abraham was the first. Kinley's president assassinated while in office. So there's McKinley, Lincoln, Garfield. He was the other one. Yeah, he was assassinated in 1881. Yeah, remember we talked about that. Yeah, he was killed because a guy felt like he was owed a job. So because he felt like he was owed a job, he killed the president.
What?
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Because he said the president was supposed to give his party members jobs, and he
his
was like,
job was to kill him?
well, Garfield was like, no, I'm not doing that. The best person gets the job. You stink. And so he said, if I stink, I'm going to kill you. So he killed him.
Ah.
So yeah, but McKinley was killed by a guy with an ideological problem. He thought that there should be no thing as government, no such thing as authority. Anarchists hate police. They assassinated them all the time. Any symbol of authority they were disgusted with. This is a time when anarchists would also go into churches, right? And they would kill the priests during service and stuff like that. So they hated religion and Christianity as well. So they were like anarchism, it's dangerous because it appeals to people who feel like they got nothing to lose and the world doesn't offer anything to them. And if they got violent tendencies, right? So not too good. It's kind of a modern problem. But whenever the president dies, vice president gets to become the real president. And of course, if he dies, you know who's in line after that? It's the Speaker of the House.
So as it is right now, you have Donald Trump, and then you have Mike Pence, and then after that is Nancy Pelosi. So, which is kind of weird because those.
Wait, didn't she like not like Donald Trump?
That's right, but she's third in line for the
She's the
presidency.
one who like did this.
Yeah. So that's one of the ironies, right? She's third in line, but they despise one another. So that would be like weird. So, as President Roosevelt was an outspoken opponent of monopolies, reasserted the U.S. authority of the Monroe Doctrine. So he's like, look, we're going to keep European powers out of this half of the world because we don't like them. Supported progressive policies, so he wanted to reform. He's going to try to do a lot of that. And he likes the projection of U.S. power. He loves the idea of the United States looking tough, of a powerful Navy, and all that. So during the Spanish-American War, the U.S. realized that it faced strategic difficulties after the USS Oregon made a 14,000-mile voyage around South America. So most of our Navy was in the Atlantic Ocean, but now we have territories in the Pacific. If we wanted to get our Navy here all the way to the west, it would have to go around South America because north of it, there's no Northwest Passage right now. It's under ice. So you have to go around South America. Super long trip. 14,000 miles. You can't do that in a day, especially with those old steamboats. So we're going to see a call for finishing a canal that was started by the French, but we're going to get a hold of in Panama. But I think we'll pick up with that next time. So we're going to go ahead and end our lecture for today. It's been about 42 minutes of lecturing. We will pick back up on Wednesday and talk more about the Progressive Era, and I'll let you know about our test date. As it goes now, it's probably going to be on Monday. But that's all right. You're going to take the same test that these kids are taking. See ya. You may.